You know how some wounds don't bleed on the outside, but they scar you deeper than any cut ever could? That's the kind of wound I carried the night I stood in front of my father's retirement banquet hall and was told I wasn't welcome. Not welcome by my own father at his own retirement party. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Eva, this is a family-only event. You shouldn't be here." Do you hear that? Family only. As if I wasn't blood. As if I hadn't spent years breaking myself to make sure he and my brother had the kind of lives they wanted. And let me tell you, when I walked away from that hotel clutching an envelope that held a retirement gift that could have changed his life, something inside me broke. But it wasn't weakness this time. It wasn't shame. It was the beginning of something sharp, something steady. It was revenge being born. But let me back up, because to understand why voiding that check was the most satisfying moment of my life, you need to know the years of manipulation, the lies, the exploitation that led me there. Growing up, my father had this way of twisting love into debt. If he gave you something, time, attention, help, he made sure you remembered it forever. "Don't forget who paid for your textbooks," he'd say at the dinner table. Or, "I sacrificed so much to raise you, Eva, the least you can do is fill in the blank." That blank was always something new. Babysit your brother while he went out? Done. Hand over most of my teenage savings because my brother forgot to make his car payment? Done. Pretend it didn't hurt when dad laughed off my acceptance letter to grad school because girls like you don't need that much education. Done. I became the family's silent bank and punching bag rolled into one. Because unlike my brother, I worked hard. I was careful with money. I built a career. And that, in their eyes, made me their safety net. Every phone call was the same. Not, "Eva, how are you?" Not, "Eva, we miss you." Always, "Eva, could you help us out just this once?" But once never meant once. It meant always. And I did it. I gave and gave and gave. Because when you grow up in a house like mine, guilt is stitched into your skin. The breaking point came a year before the retirement party. My brother had gotten into some financial mess again. I won't bore you with the details, but let's just say the words investment opportunity and fast money were involved. He called me sobbing, begging for $20,000. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, my body trembling, not just from the weight of his words, but from the realization that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep bailing them out at the cost of my own dreams, my own peace. So I told him no. For the first time in my life, I told him no. Do you know what he did? He cursed me out, said I was selfish, ungrateful, cold, said I wouldn't have anything if it weren't for Dad's sacrifices. I hung up shaking, tears streaming down my face. And when I told my father later, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd see how much his son was using me, my dad just said, "Well, Ava, family helps family. You should have done it." That was the night I realized, in their eyes, I wasn't family. I was a wallet, a servant, a resource, not a daughter, not a sister. So, fast forward to the night of the retirement party. I had wrestled with what to do for weeks. Part of me thought, just don't go, mail the check and move on. Another part of me thought, show up, smile, and prove to everyone that you're the bigger person. But the truth? Deep down, I was still craving their approval, still hoping that if I walked in with a generous gift, maybe, for once, my father would look at me with pride instead of entitlement. I wrote that check for $40,000. Do you know how long it takes to save $40,000? How many weekends I said no to vacations, dinners out, clothes I wanted but didn't buy? I tucked it into a crisp white envelope and sealed it with shaking hands. Walking up to that hotel, I told myself this would be a turning point, that maybe tonight my father would see me, not as a resource, but as his daughter. And then the words, "This is family only." The crowd laughed awkwardly. My brother smirked from across the lobby. My father turned his back on me. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. I turned, heels clicking against the tile floor, and walked out into the night. My chest burned, my throat ached, but my eyes stayed dry. Because something colder than sadness had settled in me. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same table where I had once cried after my brother cursed me out. This time, I wasn't crying. I pulled out the envelope, opened it, slid the check out, and I stared at it. My hand didn't shake when I picked up the pen. I wrote one single word across it in bold black ink: void. Then I took out a sheet of paper, and I wrote the letter. Not a gentle explanation, not a plea for understanding, a record. A record of every manipulative phone call, every dollar I handed over, every moment of shame they had piled onto me like bricks. I wrote about the nights I skipped meals to help pay for my brother's mistakes, about the time I worked 2 jobs in college so my dad wouldn't have to touch his savings, about the way they laughed at me, belittled me, erased me. And I ended it with one final line. You called this a family-only event. You made it clear I am not your family. Consider this letter and this voided check my parting gift. I mailed it the next morning. Do you want to know what happened after? The fallout was delicious. My father had been bragging to everyone at that party about how successful his kids were, how his son was this great entrepreneur, how his daughter was always there for the family. He loved playing the role of the proud patriarch. But when my letter started making the rounds, because my brother couldn't resist showing it off to extended family, it shredded that image. Relatives started asking questions. Friends looked at him differently. Suddenly, the story wasn't, look at this great man retiring. It was, why did your daughter cut you off like that? What really happened in your house? And then came the money, or rather, the lack of it. You see, all those years, I had been their safety net. I kept their world spinning. When bills piled up, I paid. When my brother fell behind, I bailed him out. When Dad wanted to keep up appearances, I chipped in quietly. Without me, the cracks started showing fast. My brother's ventures collapsed. My dad, who thought he'd coast through retirement on savings plus occasional help from me, had to face reality. Suddenly, the family's golden goose was gone. And me, for the first time, I was free. I won't lie, it wasn't easy at first. Guilt clawed at me in the quiet moments. I'd wake up at night and think, did I do the right thing? Am I heartless? But then I'd remember that hotel lobby, the smirk on my brother's face, the way my father's voice rang with finality when he said, "This is family only." No, I wasn't heartless. I was healing. And slowly, peace replaced guilt. I used the money I would have wasted on them to travel, to invest in myself, to build a life that was mine. No strings, no manipulation, just me, finally free. Sometimes revenge isn't about fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet. It's a single pen stroke across a check. It's finally saying no after years of yes. It's watching the people who exploited you trip over their own lies when you step out of their game. And let me tell you, there is nothing sweeter than reclaiming your power. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and drop a comment. Would you have voided the check or handed it over anyway? I want to know what you think. And of course, make sure you're subscribed because I've got more stories of betrayal, revenge, and sweet justice coming your way.